The first rays of dawn painted the sky in shades of pink and orange as Mira, heavily pregnant, drove through the empty streets. Her heart was heavy, not from her own discomfort, but from the ordeal she had faced throughout the night. Her 4-year-old son, Aryan, had been struck by a sudden, severe fever, leaving her in a state of panic. With her husband, Rayan, on a business trip in another country, she had no one to turn to. Despite being just days away from her due date, Mira had mustered every ounce of courage she had to take Aryan to the hospital in the dead of night. The doctor had treated Aryan, reassuring her that he would be fine with the prescribed medication. Exhausted but relieved, she finally started the drive back home with her son fast asleep in the back seat. The city was just beginning to wake up as she navigated the empty road. The world seemed serene, but Mira's body reminded her of the toll the night had taken. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel, and her swollen feet ached. She whispered a silent prayer, hoping that she would make it back home safely and get the rest she so desperately needed. But fate had other plans. Just as she reached a desolate stretch of road surrounded by trees, her car sputtered and came to a halt. Alarmed, she tried to restart the engine, but it refused to respond. The panic that had gripped her earlier in the night returned with full force. Frustrated and frightened, Mira stepped out of the car and looked around for help. The road was eerily quiet, with no signs of other vehicles or pedestrians. She flagged down the few cars that passed by, but none stopped. Desperation set in as she realized the gravity of her situation. Alone, pregnant, and stranded, she felt the tears streaming down her face. Her thoughts turned to Aryan, who was still sleeping in the car, and the baby she was about to bring into the world. The overwhelming sense of helplessness made her sink to her knees on the side of the road. She sobbed, her cries echoing in the stillness of the morning. And that's when she heard it, a faint rustling sound coming from the nearby trees. Mira's heart skipped a beat as she turned her head toward the noise. Emerging from the forest was a massive elephant, its tusks gleaming in the soft morning light. Mira froze, her tears momentarily forgotten, as the massive elephant lumbered toward her. Its sheer size was overwhelming, and she instinctively stepped back, her hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. The air seemed to grow heavier with each of the elephant's deliberate steps. Fear gripped her heart. What could an elephant want? She had always known them as majestic creatures, but this was no safari or nature documentary. This was real life, and the creature was close enough for her to hear the steady thud of its feet against the ground. Her mind raced through worst-case scenarios, envisioning the giant beast charging at her or flipping her car in a fit of aggression. But as the elephant drew closer, she noticed something unusual. Its demeanor wasn't threatening. There was no flaring of ears or trumpeting cries. Instead, it stopped a few feet away from her, its intelligent eyes meeting hers. Mira's fear began to ebb, replaced by a strange, unexplainable calm. The elephant tilted its head, its large ears flapping gently. It then raised its trunk, pointing toward her car. For a moment, Mira was too stunned to move. Was it signaling her? The idea seemed absurd, yet she couldn't deny the deliberate nature of its actions. The elephant took a few more steps closer, its trunk now brushing the rear of her car. It pushed lightly, as if testing the weight, before looking back at her. Mira's jaw dropped. Was it trying to help? She quickly wiped her tears and scrambled to her feet, her instincts telling her to trust this incredible moment. She climbed into the driver's seat, glancing back at Aryan, who remained fast asleep, blissfully unaware of the surreal scene unfolding around him. The elephant wrapped its trunk around the car's back bumper and began to push. The vehicle, which had been immobile just moments ago, started rolling forward. Mira clutched the steering wheel, guiding it as best she could. Her heart pounded in her chest, not from fear anymore, but from awe and disbelief. The road was slightly uphill, and the elephant heaved its massive body forward with every push, using its incredible strength to propel the car. Mira couldn't help but glance in the rearview mirror, her eyes welling up with tears again, but this time they were tears of gratitude. As they continued down the road, the sun climbed higher into the sky, casting golden light on the surreal scene. Mira whispered silent prayers, thanking God for what could only be described as a miracle. She didn't know how the elephant had appeared or why it had chosen to help her, but in that moment she felt an overwhelming sense of hope. After what felt like an eternity but was likely only minutes, Mira saw the outline of the hospital in the distance. Relief washed over her as she realized they were almost there. The elephant gave one final push, guiding the car into the hospital driveway before stepping back. Mira quickly parked the car and turned to thank the elephant, but as she opened the door and stepped out, she saw the majestic creature retreating toward the forest. It stopped briefly at the tree line, turning to look at her one last time. Their eyes met and Mira raised her hand in a gesture of gratitude. The elephant lifted its trunk in response, a silent acknowledgement of the bond they had shared in that extraordinary moment. She watched as it disappeared into the trees, her heart filled with a mix of wonder and gratitude. Though she didn't understand why the elephant had come to her aid, she knew that its actions had saved her life and the life of her unborn child. Mira quickly woke Arian and carried him into the hospital, where nurses rushed to her side. Despite her exhaustion and pain, she couldn't stop thinking about the elephant. It had been more than an animal. It had been her angel. The next few hours passed like a whirlwind for Mira. Inside the hospital, her focus shifted entirely to the life she was about to bring into the world. She was rushed into the delivery room, her mind replaying the surreal journey that had brought her there. Though physically exhausted, she couldn't stop thinking about the elephant. Its image was burned into her mind, a gentle giant that had emerged from nowhere, carrying her through one of the most terrifying moments of her life. As the doctors prepared her for delivery, Mira whispered a silent prayer. It wasn't just a prayer for her baby's safe arrival, but also one of profound gratitude. She thought of how close she had been to losing hope on that desolate road, and how the universe had answered her plea in the most unexpected way. The delivery was long and arduous, but Mira held on, drawing strength from the memory of the elephant's determination. Every push, every moment of pain, seemed to echo the struggle she had faced earlier. Alone, vulnerable, yet miraculously supported. And when she finally heard her newborn's first cry, the sound was like music to her ears. The baby boy was placed in her arms, his tiny hands curling instinctively around her finger. Mira looked down at him, tears streaming down her face. "You're here," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You're my miracle." Later, as she rested in her hospital room, Mira held her newborn close, marveling at the fragility and strength of life. Arian sat beside her, wide-eyed and curious about his new brother. "What's his name, Mama?" he asked, his voice filled with excitement. Mira smiled, her gaze drifting out the window to the distant trees. "His name is Jumbo," she said softly, "after the elephant that saved us." Arian tilted his head, trying to process the connection. "The big elephant? But why?" "Because," Mira explained, "that elephant reminded me of the power of kindness. It didn't need to help us, but it did. And that act of kindness brought your brother into this world. I want him to grow up carrying that spirit of compassion, just like the elephant." Rayan, standing nearby, nodded in agreement. "It's a perfect name," he said, his voice filled with emotion. As the days turned into weeks, Mira's story began to spread, first among the hospital staff and then throughout her community. Nurses who had been present during her delivery often stopped by to marvel at the tale, their expressions a mix of disbelief and wonder. "You're telling me an elephant pushed your car 3 kilometers to the hospital?" one nurse asked incredulously. "It sounds impossible," Mira admitted, "but it happened. I felt its strength, its intention. It knew I needed help." The story inspired a mix of reactions. Some neighbors came to her home, eager to hear every detail, while others dismissed it as a fanciful tale. But Mira didn't mind. She knew the truth, and she carried it with her like a secret treasure. As Jumbo grew, Mira found herself reflecting on the lessons she had learned from that extraordinary day. She often told her sons about the power of compassion and the unexpected ways it could manifest. One evening, as they sat together under the stars, Arian turned to her with a question. "Mama, do you think the elephant remembers us?" Mira looked at him thoughtfully. "I hope so," she said. "But even if it doesn't, I'll always remember it. And that's enough." The conversation led Mira to think more deeply about the bond between humans and animals. She began reading about elephants, learning about their intelligence, empathy, and complex social structures. Each new piece of information only deepened her appreciation for the creature that had saved her. One day, while visiting a local wildlife sanctuary, the family had an encounter that left them speechless. As they walked along a trail, observing the majestic elephants in the distance, one of the creatures suddenly stopped and turned toward them. Mira's heart raced as the elephant slowly approached, its massive form both intimidating and awe-inspiring. She clutched Jumbo tightly, her mind racing with a mix of fear and hope. The elephant stopped a few meters away, its trunk swaying gently. Mira felt a wave of emotion wash over her as she looked into its eyes. "Could it be?" she whispered. Ryan stepped forward, his hand resting on her shoulder. "It's him," he said quietly, his voice filled with certainty. Tears streamed down Mira's face as she raised a hand in a gesture of gratitude. The elephant responded by lifting its trunk, a silent acknowledgement of the bond they shared. For a moment, time seemed to stand still, the connection between them transcending words. In the years that followed, Mira's story became a cherished part of her family's history. Jumbo grew up hearing the tale, his name a constant reminder of the extraordinary circumstances surrounding his birth. As he grew older, he often shared the story with friends, inspiring them with its message of kindness and the mysterious ways of the universe. And though Mira never saw the elephant again, she carried its memory with her always, a symbol of hope, compassion, and the miracle of life. The story of Mira, her miraculous encounter with the elephant, and the birth of her son Jumbo was already deeply impactful. But life had more surprises in store for her, and the threads of her story continued to weave in mysterious and meaningful ways. As Jumbo grew older, his fascination with animals became undeniable. He was naturally drawn to them, often spending hours watching birds, squirrels, and even stray dogs near their home. Mira noticed his gentleness, a reflection of the extraordinary circumstances surrounding his birth. Jumbo didn't just observe animals, he seemed to communicate with them in a way that was almost magical. One afternoon, when Jumbo was about 6 years old, he wandered into the woods near their home while Mira was tending to the garden. The forest, lush and teeming with life, was a place of curiosity for him. As he ventured deeper, he came upon an injured bird with a broken wing. Without hesitation, Jumbo gently picked it up, cradling it in his hands. When Mira found him hours later, he had built a small shelter for the bird using twigs and leaves. "It needs to heal, Mama," he said, his voice full of determination. Mira felt a pang of pride and awe. She couldn't help but think of the elephant that had saved her, how its compassion had shaped her son's life in ways she never could have imagined. As the years passed, the story of the elephant continued to inspire everyone who heard it. Jumbo, now a teenager, began volunteering at a local wildlife rescue center. His connection with animals was undeniable, and he quickly became a trusted caretaker for creatures in need. One day, while assisting with the rescue of a stranded elephant calf, Jumbo felt an overwhelming sense of déjà vu. The calf, frightened and weak, reminded him of the stories his mother had told about his birth. As he helped guide the young elephant to safety, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life had come full circle. When he shared the experience with Mira, her eyes filled with tears. "You were destined for this, Jumbo," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "The elephant that saved us wasn't just a miracle. It was a sign that you were meant to make a difference." One summer, Mira and her family decided to take a trip to the very wildlife sanctuary where they had once encountered the elephant. Jumbo, now a young adult, was eager to learn more about the majestic creatures that had shaped his life. As they walked through the sanctuary, Mira couldn't help but wonder if they might see the elephant again. As they approached a large clearing, a familiar figure emerged from the trees. It was an elephant, older now, but unmistakable in its presence. Mira gasped, clutching Jumbo's arm. "It's him," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. The elephant approached slowly, its massive form radiating calm and wisdom. Jumbo stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. He raised a hand and the elephant extended its trunk, gently touching his palm. It was a moment of connection, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had brought them together all those years ago. This encounter solidified Jumbo's resolve to dedicate his life to the protection and conservation of wildlife. He pursued a career in zoology, focusing on elephant behavior and conservation. His work took him to sanctuaries and reserves around the world, where he shared his story and inspired others to see animals not just as creatures, but as sentient beings capable of extraordinary compassion. Mira watched with pride as her son grew into a man who embodied the very values she had hoped to instill in him. The story of the elephant was no longer just a family legend. It was a legacy, a reminder of the power of kindness and the unbreakable bond between humans and nature. Jumbo's passion for wildlife conservation evolved into a multifaceted career, with photography, advocacy, and storytelling becoming his tools to inspire change. As he matured, his encounters with animals deepened his understanding of their lives, their challenges, and their incredible resilience. He decided to combine his talents to make a lasting impact. Jumbo's journey into wildlife photography began as a hobby during his fieldwork. Equipped with a modest camera, he started capturing the beauty of nature through his lens. His photographs weren't just images, they were stories frozen in time, reflecting the emotions and experiences of the creatures he encountered. One of his first viral photographs was of an elephant calf playing in a waterhole, its joy and innocence radiating through the frame. People from around the world were captivated by Jumbo's work, and his photographs began appearing in leading magazines and online platforms. His unique ability to convey the soul of an animal through his lens earned him international acclaim. More importantly, it brought attention to the urgent need for conservation efforts. Jumbo didn't stop at photography. His storytelling skills, nurtured by the legacy of his own miraculous birth, led him to write articles, blogs, and eventually a book. The book, titled The Elephant's Gift, A Journey of Kindness and Conservation, recounted the incredible story of the elephant that saved his family. But it wasn't just a memoir, it was a call to action. Jumbo used his story to draw parallels between the compassion shown by animals and the responsibility humans have to protect them. The book became an instant bestseller, praised for its emotional depth and powerful message. Readers were moved not only by the miraculous events of Jumbo's birth, but also by his tireless efforts to give back to the natural world that had given him so much. The book sparked conversations about the importance of preserving wildlife habitats and the need for sustainable coexistence between humans and animals. Jumbo's advocacy extended to wildlife conservation projects worldwide. He worked closely with organizations focused on protecting elephants, helping to establish safe corridors for their migration, and combating the illegal ivory trade. His experiences on the ground often became the subject of his photography and writings, allowing him to connect with a broader audience. One of Jumbo's most ambitious projects was a documentary series titled Echoes of the Wild, where he explored the lives of endangered species and the communities working to protect them. The series included heartwarming stories of human-animal bonds, as well as sobering accounts of the challenges faced by conservationists. The episode featuring elephants included an emotional revisit to the sanctuary where Jumbo's family had once encountered the elephant that saved them. Through his work, Jumbo not only honored the legacy of the elephant that had saved his family, but also created a ripple effect of awareness and compassion. He spoke at international conferences, schools, and community events, sharing his message that even the smallest acts of kindness, whether by humans or animals, could have far-reaching consequences. In his later years, Jumbo established a foundation dedicated to wildlife conservation and education. The foundation provided funding for sanctuaries, supported anti-poaching initiatives, and offered scholarships for young conservationists. It also worked to bridge the gap between rural communities and wildlife, fostering coexistence and mutual respect. For Jumbo, every achievement, every photograph, and every story was a way to give back to the elephant that had saved him. He often visited the sanctuary, hoping for another glimpse of the creature that had changed his life. And though he never saw the elephant again, he felt its presence in every step of his journey. Jumbo's life became a testament to the power of kindness, proving that a single act of compassion, whether by a human or an animal, could change the world. His story continued to inspire generations, reminding them that even in the most challenging circumstances, hope and humanity could prevail.